So Destiny somehow got on Piers Morgan's show to debate a bunch of things like Trump and Biden primarily. They also later got into the topic of the Israel-Hamas war and the current campaign going on in Gaza, killing thousands of people. But they talked about Trump and Biden at first, and I was surprised to find out that they brought on Tomi Lahren. Tomi Lahren. If there's any sort of like talking head that grinds my I would say grinds my gears, no, grinds my earlobes more than anyone else, it is Tomi Lahren. I just find her just repulsive. I just don't like the way she engages in politics. Unbelievably vitriolic, unbelievably dishonest. So I'm excited to see how Destiny deals with Tomi Lahren in this environment on, you know, national TV, on Piers Morgan shows of all places. Let's see how it goes. But I just wanted to give you guys my biases against Tomi Lahren at the get-go.
Donald Trump's improbable return to the White House took another huge step forward at the weekend as he crushed Nikki Haley in the Republican primary in her home state of South Carolina. The former president didn't even need to turn up for the results, choosing instead to give another one of his barnstorming rally speeches to the Conservative Party Action Conference. And as usual, he didn't hold back.
A vote for Trump is your ticket back to freedom. It's your passport out of tyranny. And it's your only escape from Joe Biden and his gang's fast track to hell. And in many ways, we're living in hell right now.
Wow.
Nationwide poll.
Note that the unemployment rate right now under the Biden administration is lower than the points during the Trump administration. In fact, we're at the lowest unemployment rate for the longest period of time since the 1960s, the period where Trump says he wants to make America great again and bring us back to. The stocks are up higher than under the Trump administration. Inflation's coming down. Gas prices are coming down. We're exporting more LNG than ever. These are all things that Trump would be bragging about like crazy. It's just he's not in the office. And immediately once he gets into the office, all these positive indicators, he's going to grab onto and declare his own.
Polls suggest Trump is on track to beat President Biden in November's election. So can anything stop him? And what will Trump the sequel mean for America and the world? Here's a debate with one of Trump's most vocal critics, hugely influential YouTuber.
Destiny is one of his most vocal critics. Really? Destiny is one of his most vocal critics? That's what we're saying. I didn't know that. I didn't know Destiny had upgraded himself to one of his most vocal critics. Okay. Sounds okay.
Commentator Destiny and the host of Fearless on Outkick, Tomi Lahren. Okay. Destiny, you voted for Joe Biden last time. I think it's safe to assume you won't be voting for Donald Trump this time, but are you comfortable voting for Biden given the state that he now appears to be in?
Every time somebody attacks Biden on his senility, I feel like that is a stronger indictment of Trump's own failure as a president. I do agree that Biden definitely seems to have slowed down in his older age, but I mean, he passed so much more legislation than Trump. I think our foreign policy aims are better than they were under Trump. And I think the way that he manages the rhetoric and the overall attitude of the country is way more responsible than Trump as well. And he's not facing 90+ criminal indictments. So
that may well be true, but the reality is perception.
I mean, it is true that if Biden is senile, then you lost to a senile man, and that senile man was able to pass infrastructure bills that that Trump was unable to, and able to get the Mexicans to say that they would help pay for border security, which Trump said he was, based his whole campaign in a way that Trump was unable to. And so if it is true, then that means that Biden, in his worst, or I wouldn't say worst years, but in his older years, even after slowing down, is still able to get more done than Trump can, because he went in there as a complete political novice, and then we're like turning around his staff like crazy, like it was a fantasy football team, and he could just switcheroo it.
Is often half the battle with an election campaign. The perception is that Donald Trump is a little bit younger, but has twice the energy, twice the dynamism, and all the stuff that's being thrown at him, far from defeating him, as is usually the case with politicians, has empowered him and made him stronger. What are the Democrats going to do about that come November?
I think all Democrats...
But then he also lost in 2020. So at a certain point, if you engage yourself in enough scandals and do bad enough job, yeah, well, it can have an effect on you. It is true, though, that Donald Trump, through just going through so many scandals and having fought off so many scandals, that even if we get stuff that comes out, it's Trump saying stuff like, yeah, the Russians can do whatever the hell they want. I want to suspend the U.S. Constitution. Like, all this stuff just kind of goes through the media cycle. The media rails against it, but it doesn't have much of a polling impact. Now, of course, the polls isn't a one-to-one science. If polls were one-to-one science, Trump would have never been president. And also the results in the New York's 3rd district would not be what they were. So polling data doesn't necessarily 100% translate to results. Getting a registered voter out there to vote is very different than an American person just answering a poll. But at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I'm distracted. Can I tell you something that's bothering me? And it bothered me when I was previewing this too. Look at Tomi Lahren.
What are the Democrats going to do about that come November?
I think all Democrats can kind of hope for is that the perception of the economy continues to increase. Consumer sentiment is starting to climb again. I think that Trump is also stumbling into a few misspeaks on his own. I think there was that clip of him mixing up Nikki Haley and Pelosi. There was him talking about, I think it was the deserts of Vietnam. Both of these guys are definitely, I'd say, hitting their older age, their golden years. So I don't know if Trump is going to be free of any of the...
Why is she smiling? I'm sorry, it's freaking me out. I'm sick of it. Why is she smiling so much, man? It's starting to freak me out. What is she smiling about? What is she smiling at? Like, I'm sorry, maybe I'm just not made for TV. Is that how you're supposed to always present yourself on TV? Just... It doesn't ever... It's throwing me off. Like, why? What is she happy about? I'm not saying like a gentle smile isn't bad or something, but she's showing teeth like a predator. I'm sorry. It's just what is she smiling about?
Misspeaks that Biden has found himself stumbling into recently as well.
Well, Tomi, let's just play a clip. This is of Trump doing his Biden impression the other day.
When I imitate Biden, who can't find the stairs ever, she goes like this. Thank you. Where am I? Thank you. And then he goes. And he points. And then.
You see, Tomi, the interesting thing with me about Trump, I've known him a long time. I look at him, warts and all, good, bad, ugly. There's plenty of all of that with Trump. But his supporters love him. And one of the reasons I think that he's so popular with so many Americans is because he makes them laugh. And I watched that speech the other day. He was very funny. Not always, and some of it, as always, with Trump.
Okay, but he is funny. There's many people that are funny. You know, there's Norm Macdonald's funny. I don't know if he would be the best leader of a country. There's a lot of people that were funny that I don't think should be president of the United States. Just because he's funny doesn't mean he's a good president. Why is this being discussed? Whatever. Okay, we'll see. We'll see.
Some of the hyperbolic rhetoric was a bit alarming, but actually he was an entertainer, entertaining the crowd. That's why they like him. That's why they vote for him.
They like him because he has charisma. I like him because he has charisma. I also like him because when Donald Trump was my president, the economy was doing well. We ended...
Oh, yeah. Even though the stocks are higher now, the unemployment rate is lower now. I mean, what metric was doing better under the Trump economy that isn't doing well under the Biden economy now? Also with the knowledge that there was basically nearly a recession in the meantime that economists predicted would be in a recession and that we avoided.
Endless wars. We started no
endless
new wars.
Oh, really? No endless wars. So was all those strikes in Yemen just like make-believe? Was all those weapon sales to Saudi Arabia as they tore Yemen apart make-believe? Was the troop increase in Afghanistan make-believe, or the increase in bombings and the dropping of the Moab and the increase in drone strikes and the restricting of drone strike data to be less transparent about those drone strikes? Come on. Just because we didn't invade fucking Iraq again, right? Or we didn't do some big new invasion doesn't mean it was a time of peace and tranquility. He finished Operation Inherent Resolve. He was finishing military operations started under the Obama admin. Not to mention proposing invasion plans of Venezuela and bragging. I mean, I don't even get to the Presidential Records Act, but Soleimani blowing up. I mean, look, all I'm saying is it wasn't the peace of a time of peace and tranquility as much as people like to suggest. Hell, if it wasn't for him like ceding back to the Turks, they could have prevented the Turkish invasion of northeastern Syria.
Was relatively peace around the world with Donald Trump at the helm of the United States of America. People didn't like what he tweeted. People didn't like the way that he spoke. Maybe they didn't like the way that he dressed or the way that his hairstyle was or his fake tan. But none of that mattered because the United States was doing well. Our border was secure. The world was...
There was still deportations. There were still border crossings under the Trump admin. He also failed to build the wall. He also failed to get Mexico to pay for it.
A better place with Donald Trump at the helm. And when Democrats talk about Joe Biden and they say...
What reforms did Trump do that were long-lasting enough to have an impact? It was because most of the stuff that Trump did through executive order, which, I mean, this is the same problem with Obama, is that doing those things by executive order are good for 4 years, maybe to 8 years, but it's the problem we're finding with the Dreamers. Is that we can try to protect them as much as we can through executive order, but until legislation is done, those protections are not going to be solid. It's the same reason why people were scrambling to try to make sure there was also a legislative precedent on top of the Dobbs decision in case it got overturned, like Roe v. Wade. There has to be some like institutional change, and he failed at doing that, whether it was overturning Obamacare, whether it was failing to go through with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, whether it was building the wall, getting the Mexicans to pay for it, whether it was getting rid of all the debt he said he was going to get rid of in 4 to 8 years. In fact, not only did he not get rid of the debt, he massively increased the debt and massively expanded the deficit. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't accomplish anything, right? Like, I mean, he banned trans people from being in the military. We all feel much safer now. Many 9/11s have been prevented since then. But I mean, I just don't think that his presidency in the 4 years he had was as transformative or has had as much of an impact from a legislative angle as the Biden admin has. Now, whether we talk about culturally or we talk about the tempo of the conversation inside the United States or the rhetoric in our politics, or the culture war battle, all that we can maybe change up the discussion. But legislatively, I think Biden gets the W.
Oh, he's slipping a little bit. My goodness, we know that they are obviously gaslighting us because we can clearly see that Joe Biden is not just slipping. He was slipping in 2020. He has slipped all the way now that we're in 2024. And it's not just little misspeaks here and there. Everybody has misspeaks. They mix people up. For Joe Biden...
Yeah, I love how they have to change this now because Biden's 81, Trump is 77. We've got the retirement home running the country. Mitch McConnell is now finally talking about retiring in November. He's still Senate Majority Leader. We got the retirement home running the country. And it looks like we're going into 2024 with the retirement home still running the country. So I got to choose between two very old people, right? And now it's no longer, because the attack was, oh, look at Biden, he's slipping on his words. It can't be that anymore because Trump's slipping on his words like crazy. But he has been slipping on his words during the entirety of his presidency, going up, calling the president of Kurdistan Mr. Kurd, mixing up the Balkans and the Baltics. But I mean, the consistent mixing up of who he's running against this election, constantly saying he's running against Obama. He's not running against Obama. Him mixing up Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi, saying that Nikki Haley was in charge of Capitol security, and he went on and on and on about it. Just the rambling. So that looks bad. Definitely if you put in a compilation. We could go get some compilations and watch them right now if we wanted to. But it's no longer, Biden's slipping up. It's, no, Biden's slipping up even more. Your dementia patient's even worse than our dementia patient. This is the nature of the conversation. Now, I disagree with that. But I also just want to show you how low it's gotten, where it's like, yeah, our old person is also, dementia riddled, but just a little less so.
You have a special counsel report that quite plainly says we can't go after this man for his classified documents because he's a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. That's
not what it said, because she's a liar and a snarky, I'm trying to reel it in a bit. It's a 340-page report, all written together to say Biden's innocent and they can't get him of anything. And part of it was speculating on what if they brought it to trial, and they didn't have the right to determine this. So I don't know why it was even in the report. I don't know why you need 340 pages to say you can't get Biden with anything. He's innocent. But he says that if they were to take it to trial, the defense would have you believe that Biden is a well-meaning elderly man with poor memory. He was speculating on what the defense of the Biden team, legal team, would be in a potential trial if it was put in front of a jury, and how he doesn't believe that the jury would accept the prosecution's argument. That is not what the report was supposed to indicate. The report was just supposed to indicate if there was evidence to prove that Biden committed some crime, which there wasn't. And so, since there was not a political adventure to be had with the conclusion of, okay, we can't get him with anything, they had to start speculating and turn it into a political spectacle, which it became through 340 pages of unnecessary garbage. I mean, I'm not saying there's nothing in it that's of any use, but it was just pure speculation, which was not his job to do. He's not a medical expert. He cannot determine Biden's memory. He didn't do some like medical examination. I'm not saying that there's no reason to speculate on Biden's memory or anything like that. All I'm saying, she's lying about this.
That says it all right there. Maybe we can't indict him 96 times. We can't charge him with 96 things because he simply is not cognitively there enough to be able to withstand it.
That is not, that's just speculation.
That's the leader of the United States. That's the best the Democrats can do for their party. I'm sorry. You guys better be shaking in your boots if that's what you're going to go with in November.
Yeah, we're going with Donald Trump, the man who brags about being able to circle the elephant in the cognitive test.
I mean, Destiny, you know, I know your view of Trump, but it's hard to argue with all of what Tomi just said, isn't it? I mean, the Democrats seem to me to be sleepwalking in to a complete disaster if they're not careful. Biden does look, from here across the pond anyway, like someone who can barely string a sentence together or stay...
Dude, they don't watch. I'm sorry. I don't think Piers Morgan does either. I don't think Piers Morgan legitimately sits down and watches Biden's speeches. Biden does slip up, but in most of Biden's press interactions, the majority of his speeches he does, he's perfectly fine. His voice is low. He's not a yeller. Sometimes he'll get mad when he's interacting with the press and he'll get more aggressive. But what'll happen, like, for example, you know that thing where he mixed up the president of Mexico and the president of Egypt? If you watch an entire press conference, it's like 40 minutes of him just like doing a press conference normally as a president would do, answering questions fine, being very energetic. And then he answers the question about specifically the Egyptian response to the war in Gaza eloquently. He might disagree, he might not. But then he mixes that up at the end. And then this is the thing that people take away from him. I'm not saying that Joe Biden never mixes anything up, but the idea that he can barely string a sentence together, that's not true.
On his own 2 feet. How would anyone vote for someone given they have to do 4 years more?
Are we gonna have to go back to that clip of stand on his two front feet? Can we pull up that clip of Trump talking about the ramp?
1,106 cadets were graduated, and beautiful. So we walked like the equivalent of about 3 blocks, which was fine. We go on stage, which is fine. They make speeches, then I make a speech. It lasted a long time. I don't know, maybe 45 minutes. The sun is pouring down on me. Would you like to salute each cadet almost 600 times? You know what that is? 600 times! If you go home and you say, it's like a workout without a weight, right? I was on the stage for hours. Hours! Sun, I came home, I had a nice tan. Meaning I had a nice sunburn. The general says, "Sir, are you ready?" I said, "I'm ready, General. Where are we going now?" And he goes like this, "Right here, sir." I walk on. I've got myself a problem, General, because I'm wearing leather bottom shoes, which is good if you're walking on flat surfaces. It's not good for ramps. It had no handrail. It was like an ice skating rink. I said, "General, there's no way I can make it down that ramp without falling on my ass, General." So I said, "General, get ready, because I may grab you so fast."
Okay, now you've heard his description of how difficult it was to get down the ramp. We're not gonna watch the whole thing. There's him complaining about getting down the ramp for a good, like, I don't know, like a good 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes. Can we actually get the footage of him going down the ramp? Here it is. Look at it. Oh my God, this is fun to watch. It's very difficult. Very difficult. Okay, back to this. I'm sorry. I just love these classic Trump moments.
From November, as President of the United States, the toughest job in the world.
I mean, it depends on what you're pushing for. I mean, if you want to elect a comedian because he's got good charisma, then I agree that Trump definitely has better stage presence than Biden does. I think if you're a Democrat, you want to support Biden, you just have to try to stick in the realm of fact. Republicans inhabit a totally separate world right now. I just heard Tomi Lahren say that we're doing better on the foreign policy front because Trump was better for being in endless wars. I mean, he bombed Syria, he abandoned Kurdish allies, he kicked the can down the road in Afghanistan, he hid Yemen drone strikes from us, he was still part of the Saudi-led coalition to bomb Yemen.
Now, when he says he hid Yemeni drone strikes from us, what he's referring to is the fact that as Donald Trump expanded the drone campaign to higher levels than under Obama, what he did while they was doing that was he didn't want the press looking into it too much, so he restricted the amount of information that was publicly available. I already wanted the transparency to increase during the Obama administration. The Trump administration decided to go in the exact opposite direction, which makes it more difficult to look into the drone strikes that were done and follow what was being done by the administration at the time. Maybe that plays into his whole like peacemaker image, is the fact that he was, trying to stop anybody from looking at when he was not, exactly making peace.
He didn't do anything about Russia's takeover of Crimea. I mean, like, the idea that Trump was better on any of these areas of foreign policy is ridiculous. The idea that he was better domestically when he completely mishandled
Obama, by the way. That was
Obama's not my
my
anointed
friend.
one. That's great. But Trump still didn't do anything about it. Even if you think that Trump does have good ideas for the country, he has just failed as a leader. He's a failure of a businessman. He's a failure of a leader. He can't get people together to write legislation. Joe Biden, in all his senility, was somehow able to pass the same infrastructure bill that Donald Trump said for 4 years he was going to get done. He didn't. Donald Trump couldn't even repeal or replace Obamacare, which is what a lot of Republicans literally voted him to do. Like, the idea that Trump is a competent leader is anything more than just a comedian or a guy that does funny one-liners on Twitter is delusional.
I mean, you can blame him for many things, but as Tomi said, you can't.
I do want to be careful though, because I understand that like Trump isn't the best legislator. Trump isn't the best person when it comes to like properly operating our system. But if you just say he's nothing more than a comedian, then it also makes it sound like that somebody, even if they're good with just managing people, they're not good with like legislating, they're not good with the system, that doesn't mean that he still couldn't do damage or find ways to capture the system, or that he couldn't be assisted by other people, either with good or, in my case, what I would think, not good intentions to help capture the system. Definitely if that person is openly willing to say, I'll suspend the Constitution, and Republicans still support him. And so I do want to say that, yes, I don't think Trump is exactly a political dynamo when it comes to legislating. We should be careful about just describing him as like, oh, he's like a comedian.
Blame him for the takeover of Crimea, because that was years before Trump came into power.
No, I'm not blaming him for the takeover of Crimea. I'm saying that Trump has never made a good but difficult foreign policy decision. If you look at the Doha agreement that he made with the Taliban, he kicked the can down the road. He says that he would be strong on Ukraine. The only thing he cared about for Ukraine was trying to get information about Hunter Biden.
What about what Joe Biden did in Afghanistan, which was the most shameful and disgraceful overnight fleeing of a country and throwing millions of Afghan women back to the Taliban walls? Now, you can blame...
Okay, so Piers, wait, to be clear, I wish the withdrawal was done differently, but my question would be, well, how could the withdrawal have been done to prevent an ANA collapse? And every conclusion I go back to would be doing the negotiations with the Taliban differently to include the ANA, to have their interests at the table, to make them be treated more as a legitimate partner. But that would mean changing the Trump era negotiations that were done, and it would mean Biden tearing up the deal that was made with the Taliban, because he already did one extension and the Taliban made very clear that they would not tolerate another. And so that would either mean making them renegotiate, which the Taliban made very clear they were not willing to do, which could possibly mean American soldiers fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan for who knows how many years, as many people in his defense circles were telling Biden, let's stay in Afghanistan, let's stay in Afghanistan, let's stay in Afghanistan. And he decided to take the Band-Aid off and rip it. Knowing that there would be political consequences with it, which there were. And I still think it wasn't managed properly, the withdrawal, but he made that difficult decision. So I would like to know, does Piers Morgan think we should have stayed in Afghanistan? We should have torn up the agreement, the Doha agreement, or should we have gone through with the deal that Trump negotiated and then passed over to the next administration to actually handle?
Trump all you like for that, but the bottom line is it happened under Joe Biden on his watch. He was president. It was a catastrophic failure, that evacuation. So many allies and friends of the Americans were left in its wake. Many people died that day. And women in Afghanistan have gone back to the medieval dark ages. That's on Joe Biden, isn't it?
No. If you
Really?
read the if you read the Special Inspector General report for Afghanistan, the whole reason why that pullout happened on that timetable was because of the Doha agreements that Donald Trump signed. He drew our troop levels down to historic lows in Afghanistan for when Biden came into office because Donald Trump put America on a timetable to leave that country. If Biden wanted to, he could have come in and undone that.
So you're blaming, just to be clear though, Destiny, you're blaming Donald Trump for...
Can we come on, let him finish. Let him finish. It's 2v1 right now. At least let him finish.
Decision that was taken 8 months after he left office.
Is Piers Morgan like slow? Like, I'm sorry, like what? I don't agree with Piers Morgan, but he's usually a little quicker than this. If the negotiation was made to leave on a certain timetable, what Biden would have to do is break with the timetable. Piers, if you worked at my news company, right? And you were going to take over, and I negotiated with another news company or with the employees a certain salary, and you come in and you're like, I don't like this. You might have to make the tough decision to tear up that bill and screw over those workers. But that might also come with the decision by all those workers to say, okay, we're not going to cooperate. We're going to go on strike. Now, is the strike Piers Morgan's fault? Is the strike the person who negotiated it my fault, knowing that it would be unsustainable? Whose fault is it? And what Destiny's doing is including that context. Now, I don't think we can completely wipe Biden and the administration of any responsibility, but to try to pretend that the foundation wasn't lied at Doha when the ANA was treated like secondary, given secondary status, but not even being included in the negotiations, which is the same thing we must avoid in Ukraine, by the way. I think that context is important.
That decision was taken under Donald Trump. The timetable was established under Donald Trump.
He
It's
didn't
called
have
the
to stick
Doha
to it.
Agreement.
Joe Biden's a big boy. He's the president of the United States. I mean,
Wait. So if this is the argument, then the argument would be that Trump's plan was so bad that Biden should have abandoned it, and it's Biden's fault, and we need to blame Biden for going through with Trump's policy. And that's an advantage Trump has over Biden, is the fact that Biden went through with Trump's plan? What? I see, this makes no sense to me.
Tomi, it seems to me that the desperate attempts...
Is he a big boy, Piers? Is he a big boy? I'm not so sure. He has to use the kitty stairs, but I just have to jump in here.
Oh my God. Her fucking words are so grating on the ears, man. I pity the fool, man. I pity the fool who ends up...
Because I don't think anybody wanted to stay...
Very sorry for Mr. Lahren.
...in Afghanistan. That wasn't the point. The timetable that Donald Trump negotiated, there was nothing wrong with the timetable. Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan was catastrophic. He didn't have the support that he needed. He didn't have the strategy that he needed. It wasn't about staying in Afghanistan in perpetuity. Nobody wanted that. I'm sure
So what should have Biden done differently? Why should Biden have abandoned Trump's plan or changed Trump's plan? How was Trump's plan? This should be the question from Destiny. Why was Trump's plan so flawed that following it caused that disaster? That'd be a question. Can we really just say that following this framework, the framework had no impact on how the withdrawal was done?
Democrats didn't want to be in an endless war in Afghanistan either. It was the way that Biden handled it. And every time since then, he has failed when it comes to foreign policy. Now we've got Israel at war. We've got Ukraine still and heading into year, 2.5 of war that we are still funding. The world is a much more dangerous place.
Funding, by the way, under the Trump administration, there was aid sent to Ukraine, even if he tried to hold it up and block it. But when you say war that we're fighting, should we stop? Should we abandon Ukraine? Is that Tomi Lahren's position? Is to stick her tail between her legs and run home? Is that her position on it? I'd like to hear it.
And that doesn't even bring me to my southern border, where we have 10 million illegal immigrants who have invaded on Biden's watch.
Invaded with tanks and planes and bombs. They've already taken Austin, Texas. They're marching on Nevada. What will Biden do?
Sure,
I'm so sick of the invasion talk. Say undocumented immigrants. Undocumented immigrants. You can say masses of people. You can use so many different rhetorical terms and words you could use. Just stop using the word invasion. I hate when that word is used. It brings down the usefulness of the word.
My friend is going to tell me that that is Donald Trump's fault as well, even though he oversaw the most secure border that we believe in American history.
The most secure border in American history. Wow. Is there anything backing that up, or is it just Trumpism?
That we know of. So there is no disputing the record.
That we know of? What does that even mean? We can go back and look at the different presidential administrations. I assume that she just is guessing. I assume Trump's was the most, and that we know of. You mean that you haven't gone back and checked? So you just said it? Just a Trumpism, just throwing stuff out into the wind, just hoping it catches water.
You can say that Joe Biden was able to sit there as a shadow president while things got passed through Democrat chambers, but you can't sit here and tell me that the man is cognitively well or that he's done anything on his own accord to better the world of the United States.
Well,
what does that even mean, on his own accord? Like he didn't have staff involved? The president didn't do anything completely on his own accord, but both under the Trump administration, the Obama administration, and the Biden administration. If you think Trump didn't heavily rely on staff to get shit done, you think Trump was sitting down there like HR 2. No, man. Of course he had people with him. I don't know what she means by that.
Let me ask Destiny.
My friend, you know this.
Let me ask Destiny my favorite question of all my liberal friends, which is...
God, can you stop smiling? Can she frown just a little bit? There's a neutral face. Like, something about it's just creeping me out. I'm trying not to be mean, but I'm actually just repulsed. I gotta focus on Piers. Piers' face is always sad. I thank you, Piers.
Do you know how many illegal immigrants Barack Obama deported in 8 years?
How many illegal immigrants did he deport, or did they have
Did he have deported, thrown out of the country?
I don't know the number of that.
Have a guess.
For when you say deport, you mean somebody that was...
What does this have to do with guess the amount of undocumented immigrants Obama deported? What does this prove?
Already
I'm sorry.
in the country, and then they were caught in the country and removed. My guess is those numbers are always fairly low. Probably less than 1 million. I have no idea. I truly have no idea.
3 million, which is the greatest number pro rata of any president in history. And
thank you, Lahren, for at least the smirk's better. The smirk is better. I still don't like the smirk, but I can look at her now. My eyes can bear to turn to the right.
Earned him the moniker in Mexico of Deporter in Chief. And yet, oddly, whenever I talk to my liberal friends, they never know this. They never made a fuss at the time. They were quite comfortable about that.
Destiny knows about the Deporter in Chief term, but Destiny will make the comment about contacts on the border and how many during the Obama administration, what happened is there'd be contacts and then they would list that as a deportation, even though it really wasn't a deportation, just kind of put them on the other side of the border. It's complicated. There was a lot of deportation during the Obama administration, but sometimes people fudge with the numbers.
Happening. And I look at what's going on the southern border now. Apparently Biden's going down the same day as Trump on Thursday, which will be fascinating, but he hasn't been there I don't think he may have been once before in his time as president, which is insane given how obviously problematic the southern border has become. Whichever side of the political divide you're on, would you accept that?
Is this all just gonna be like Piers Morgan and Tomi Lahren going at Destiny? I thought this was like, so it is just Destiny versus Piers Morgan and he got Tomi Lahren as backup. So that's what it is. Okay.
Would I accept that the border is a problem?
Well, not only a massive problem, but that President Biden, to date, in his tenure, has done absolutely nothing but make it worse.
I mean, I don't know how people can say this. And dude, I'm sorry, but President Biden, he's been saving up his campaign funds. He hasn't been spending like crazy. He needs to just publish like crazy the border bill that the Republicans sunk. I'm not even that happy with it. I think it actually went too far in concessions to the Republicans. A lot of progressive immigration activists are not happy with it. A lot of concessions that were made, but they sunk the deal. They sunk getting concessions that Republicans have been asking for over a decade after tying it to a national security issue, which they shouldn't have done. I think it's ridiculous. The idea that we would tie immigration policy to a foreign war that we pledged that we would support an ally in. It's ridiculous. Could you imagine South Korea hearing, sorry, we were going to send you support as the North Koreans cross the border, but we have this don't say gay bill we're trying to do on the federal level, and until Democrats pass it, we just can't assist. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Like, it degrades our national security. It degrades our deterrence. It makes it look like our defense relationships isn't tied to a survival of a state or a stability or through genuine alliances, but that it's all just like cruelly and cynically transactional. But putting that aside, wait 1 second.
In his tenure.
Oh yeah, the immigration deal that was sunk, they gave them all these concessions, and they sunk the deal because it's an election year, and it's pretty obvious that Trump doesn't want any solution to what's going on the border during an election year, even if I didn't think all those problems would be solved. And I didn't like that we gave big concessions while not getting citizenship for the Dreamers. But he went further, made those concessions to Senator Langford, but then once Trump didn't like the deal, because it could possibly help the Democrats in the election season, he threw it under the bus and threw Senator Langford under the bus with the deal.
Has done absolutely nothing but make it worse.
And now we're still being told that we have to give immigration concessions in order to pass Ukraine aid. After they sunk the deal, negotiated over 5 months as the war goes on for aid tied to border concessions, which shouldn't have even been done in the first place.
I don't know about absolutely nothing but make it worse. I think one of the issues right now is Republicans are holding up funding to actually apportion more money to border security. I think that there are definitely border problems that exist right now that definitely need attention. But I think
I'm sorry. Everything about, look, I don't like my dislike of people to come out this much through these reviews, but I feel like Tomi Lahren is the exact problem with American political commentary. Her type of cynical, extremely vitriolic, full of disinformation and lies, walking back from every conclusion, never thinking for yourself. I think this is the type of stuff that makes people hate their neighbors. This is the type of stuff that makes like people sitting on the couches like clutch their soda cans harder and harder, thinking of people that just like live across the street from them. And I don't like it. I don't like it.
Comparing it to Donald Trump, when he was able to utilize the emergency of COVID and the fact that the immigration numbers were at historic lows over the COVID period, and then to say that, well, look, he did a way better job than Biden did, where once COVID ends and then everything starts to open up again, you see a huge surge of immigrants. Isn't the most fair comparison. But obviously, yes, something needs to be done with the border, of course. And I hope the Republicans approve funding in Congress for something to actually be done.
Well, Tomi, that's an interesting point where I would be critical, I think, of your position on this, because I absolutely believe that Ukraine has got to be helped to defeat Putin, or at least hold him off, because the alternative for the West, it seems to me, is extremely dangerous and alarming.
Oh boy, Tomi Lahren, let's hear it. Please, Piers, you spent the time going after, can you turn a little? Can we get a little pylon in the other way?
Which is that Vladimir Putin seizes large chunks of a sovereign democratic country and is allowed to keep it. And the idea that won't embolden him to just go and do the same elsewhere, I think is for the birds. I also think it's for the birds that China, looking at this, won't.
Hey, why did Tomi Lahren's smile go away? What happened? Wait, why is she not smiling anymore? That's the least smile I've seen for the whole conversation. Wait, what happened? Why is she not so happy? I don't know. Something changed.
And then immediately thinking about invading and taking back Taiwan.
Well, I would also say this. If Donald Trump were our president right now, Putin would have never done that because he didn't when Donald Trump was in office. We mentioned earlier under Obama.
Moron. You can't determine that because Putin invaded in 2022, the reason he didn't do so was because Trump was in office. Trump was the president who withheld Ukraine aid that was congressionally approved against the Constitution to the point that he was impeached for it because he wanted a transactional relationship with the Ukrainians where they gave him dirt on his political opponents in return for aid. Does that make it sound like that Donald Trump is particularly, determined to defend Ukraine against Russian invasion? What is it about Donald Trump that would have particularly deterred the Russians given that type of signaling? I don't see it. I don't see it at all. My position is, and I'm trying to be as fair here as possible, I think Obama failed, I think Trump failed, and I think Biden failed on certain levels. That doesn't mean they all failed completely. I think when you look at the situation in 2014 and what military forces Ukraine had available, you can, from the position of understanding where Ukraine was domestically, knowing where military was, and knowing our history with trying to negotiate with the Russians, you can understand how Obama got to that position. And some decisions he made there at the time, you know, were correct. He should have been harder. He should have been harder. He should have been much harder. And I think not being harder gave the Russians the wrong signal. And then Trump got in there and he didn't change that policy whatsoever when it came to Ukraine aid. In fact, he didn't champion the Ukraine aid. He held it up. Then Biden came in and he was in for 2 years. Now, I don't know what he would have done in the last 2 years, but I doubt he would have radically changed the position either in that situation. So look, I think that all three administrations continued certain policies that failed in deterring Russian advancement. Now, I do think that certain people like Donald Trump would probably be worse in handling a war right now, since he's much more willing to make big concessions and I think drop deterrence against the Russians, make big scary statements about the Russians can do whatever the hell they want, which are really disturbing our neighbors over there in Europe, and are even leading to the polls to say that if we don't support the Ukrainians, they'll have to pursue possibly a nuclear weapons program because they need stronger deterrence against the Russians if they're unsure of American determination to help our transatlantic allies. So, I mean, I personally think when it comes to this war, Trump would be a really bad, and that's not even talking about Trump's other statements about the war. I don't want to get too into it, but Trump would have stopped the invasion? I don't know about that.
Obama, they go in, take Crimea under Biden, go in and try to...
I mean, if Trump is saying right now he's so willing to make a deal on day one, what makes you think that Putin wouldn't use that logic to say, okay, let's invade, take more land, and Trump will make a deal? I love this freeze frame, by the way. Like, why, if Trump is so willing to make a deal like this, why wouldn't, if Putin invaded under Trump, wouldn't Trump make a deal then? Unless you think Putin would say, oh, Trump's going to deploy troops to fight with the Ukrainians. Do you want to deploy troops to fight with the Ukrainians?
I probably owe this after years of ad block.
Hey, thank you for the tier 2 sub. After years of ad block, I forgive you, Alex. I forgive you. I understand the struggle against advertisement.
We mentioned earlier, under Obama, they go in, take Crimea. Under Biden, go in and try to take Ukraine. So Donald Trump, will just say, he started no new wars, and the world was either respectful of Donald Trump or fearful, doesn't matter which.
He continued the wars that were ongoing. Some of them expanded them.
Also say this. We don't, on my side, when I talk about not funding Ukraine anymore, it's not because we want Putin to take Ukraine. It's because we understand that here in the United States of America, we have more problems that we have to attend to. We've got home.
You're right. If we just took those cluster bombs and gave them to homeless veterans, then we could solve like our issues or whatever. If we took those old Vietnam troop carriers we sent over and gave them to AIDS patients, then we could really deal with this health crisis. If we took all the fentanyl and we put them in the Tatacams and shot them at the Chinese, then we truly, like, get out of here. Get out of here. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. How little do you think of the United States that we can't spend 5% on Pentagon spending to uphold commitments that we made in the 90s, commitments that made us safer when it came to denuclearization and nuclear nonproliferation? When it comes to European security, what about American exports to Europe, our #1 export market? 45% of global GDP is concentrated in Europe and North America. Trying to bar us off from the world is the same mistake Japanese emperors made, and that was ended with American ships on their coastline firing cannonballs, scaring the shit out of them. You cannot separate us from the end of the world, from the rest of the world. It fails every time. Every time we try to separate ourselves from the rest of the world, we get dragged back in. The housing crisis in the United States caused economic panic in China. If China was to go economically under tomorrow, we would be affected. To try to isolate ourselves from the effects of this war when we've already made commitments, 30-year-old commitments to these countries, destroys American credibility, destroys American deterrence, and it makes you look like a goddamn snake.
Homeless veterans, we've got a border invasion of our own.
Homeless veterans, it's literally the homeless veterans. Give the homeless veterans cluster bombs. Give the homeless veterans cluster bombs. Hey, guess what? If the manufacturing plants that still exist in Ohio can't export to Europe, do you think those people will be able to pay their bills, keep their homes, and stay unhomeless? Unhomeless? Stay housed? Unhomeless. I'm just separate. It's just war. For her, it's just war. It's just a war overseas. How does it include us? Who gives a fuck? Who needs to look into it? It's just a war. It's a war you dump things into. Consequences, who gets affected? Do we get affected? What happens to Europe? What happens to people of Ukraine? Disregard all that. It's a war. It's just a whole. That's the depth of the analysis here.
thought of
why can't you
sending
do both,
more
Tomi?
money,
I keep
more
hearing
weapons
this.
to Ukraine.
I keep hearing this, but I find it really odd to hear any American conservatives almost saying Putin should be allowed to just take what he's taken. That would never have happened 20 years ago in American political discourse. There's been a massive sea change in conservative mentality to how to deal with a Russian dictator. But secondly, on the wider point about Ukraine, surely it comes down to this. If we applied the same mentality to Adolf Hitler in World War II, we'd all be likely speaking German. Why are we so weak about standing up to him in Ukraine? It's the same as when Hitler invaded Poland.
Piers, it's not the same because
Dude,
Ukraine
she
is
ain't smiling anymore, man. Where'd that smile go? It disappeared.
a corrupt country. So we also have to
Oh! Oh! Why didn't somebody tell me? I had no idea. Oh my God, I had no clue. Oh my God, corruption? They didn't have that in the 40s. They had none of, all those trucks and tanks and weapons we sent to the Soviets. No, Stalin, up 100% a non-corrupt Stalin when we sent all that over. That's why if the Soviets were corrupt, if the Poles were corrupt, if the French were corrupt, if the British were corrupt, if any of these people were corrupt, if the Chinese, if Chiang Kai-shek, she's fucking historically illiterate. He's historically illiterate. I'm sorry, dude. Modern Ukraine is less corrupt than the Soviet Union. I will make that claim, and I will make it proudly. Modern Ukraine is less corrupt than Chiang Kai-shek's China. I will make that claim proudly and loudly. And the national security concerns against the Germans still existed, whether the Soviets were corrupt or not. The question is, in the assistance we're providing the Ukrainians, is it being funneled off into corruption? Now, we know the Ukrainians have been improving on the issue. You can check the corruption index. You can check the fact that they've been given candidate status in the EU, which I think shows some marked improvements. We can look at all the corruption cases that are advancing on both high-level officials and low-level recruitment officials. That doesn't mean all these issues have been dealt with, but we appointed an inspector general, and that inspector general has yet to find any instance of American aid being spent on corruption, being sent off and funneled into the pockets of Ukrainian politicians. And when you look at the package we are debating sending them, the 60 billion, 20 billion of that is replenishing U.S. stockpiles. Tons of that is being spent in the United States, when I think a decent portion of it probably should be spent over there to build their defense industry, but spent in the United States to build our own defense industry, then we take those products and send it over. And so unless we have evidence of those products being sold on the global weapons market, I know Vivek Ramaswamy at one point said, like, our javelins were being sent to the cartels. He eventually deleted that because he couldn't identify what weapon was which. He messed up what weapon was which. That guy wants to make gun control policy, or he wanted to before he dropped out, of course. Man, corruption. Oh my God, genius. It's different because back in World War II, all of our allies were not corrupt. Fucking ridiculous.
to deal with that. There are many Americans that you'll talk to.
There's no corruption in World War II. Oh, thank you, Tomi.
That initially supported aiding and assisting Ukraine. And then as we sent more and more money, and as the Pentagon couldn't account for $1 billion in weapons, and as we're not really sure where the accounting...
By the way, the Inspector General report that she's quoting, they give reasons for why. One of the big reasons is that we had to evacuate the embassy at the start of the war. And we had to evacuate the embassy because the Russians were marching there, expanding death pit after death pit. It's very Christian of her to, you know, bring up concerns about that, which I've never heard of Tomi bring up. But it was expanding these death pits that they fled, and so they didn't have staff, because that's how we tracked the weapons, was through the embassy staff in Kiev. And then once they came back, they could resume tracking. But in that time, they couldn't go to the different storehouses and check where the weapons were because the staff had to evacuate. And when we were there, a big problem we ran into is our weapons would be shipped to a storehouse, and by the time we would get there, the weapons had already been sent to the front because the ammo shortage is so bad. And so these artillery shells would only stay like a 1, 2, 3 days in a storehouse. And so when our monitors would go there, they'd take down what was there, but some of it had already been shipped near the front. And because of the constraints we've put on our staff, we don't allow our staff to go near the front, near to the frontline storehouses where they keep the weapons, and they could track it closer to its use, which I'm not necessarily against approving that to have even better review. But are you going to get the American government to agree to put American staffers that close to the front line? There's a bunch of reasons as to why there was some money that was untracked, but the Inspector General report never concluded it was because it was funneled off, never concluded that it was because of corruption. And if it was proved, then it would be covered on every major news headline and story on every conservative publication in the country. And you know Tomi would be bringing it up if it was the case.
Is going for this, we have a lot of concerns, as we should, because we're sending our hard-earned tax dollars to a corrupt
But why
country.
can't you?
Again, we're not. We're sending, the tax dollars are being spent here, and then we're sending the equipment over. He doesn't know what's happening.
Why
Everyone
can't
will
you help
agree that Russia's
Ukraine?
corrupt, but guess what's the number two?
Right.
Ukraine.
But why can't you help Ukraine and fix the southern border? Why
Ukraine is not the second most corrupt country in the world. It's ridiculous.
does it have to be one or the other? America has the money to do this. It has the military firepower to help
Well,
Ukraine,
America
and it
doesn't
also
have
has
the
the
money, Piers.
ability,
America
if it
doesn't
really
have the money.
focuses.
We do have the money. We're the world reserve currency. How did we not have, well, how did we have the money to do $800 billion worth of tax cuts and massively expand the deficit under Trump? But we don't have the money to spend $65 billion on a massive national security issue that we committed to for over 30 years.
To sort the southern border out. I don't understand
That's not
this
even
argument.
talking about the length of the transatlantic relationship.
America can't do two things at once. It's the number one superpower in the world, isn't it? I mean,
But it would be nice if we could do two things at once. With the stroke of a pen, President Biden could help solve the border crisis. He is not going to do that.
Trump said himself that there had to be a legislative solution to the border crisis. Either Tomi thinks Trump's a liar, or Tomi doesn't know he said that.
It's not a matter of can you, it's a matter of are our leaders able to.
That, of
And
course, was said during his term, not during Biden's term, of course.
unfortunately, they're not. But when you look at Ukraine, which is a corrupt country, and we're sending our tax dollars
I'm sick. It's a corrupt. Trump was corrupt. Trump was horribly corrupt. His son, Jared Kushner, after he left being the Middle East peace envoy with no diplomatic experience, was awarded $2 billion from the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, $2 billion to act as an investor. Now, mind you, Jared Kushner made his game in property in real estate. Why was he be given $2 billion in an industry he has no experience in from the Saudi Foreign Wealth Fund? Well, wouldn't you know it, that Donald Trump's first visit overseas while in office was to Saudi Arabia, and he approved tons and tons and tons of weapon sales. And when Jamal Khashoggi was assassinated, what did Trump do? Absolutely nothing. I also want to mention that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia got involved to make sure Jared Kushner got the money, because the board on the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund looked at the fact that they were about to give $2 billion to Jared Kushner, and you know what they decided? That's a bad investment, because he doesn't have any experience in the type of investment they were giving him money for. So what did the Crown Prince do? He got involved, overruled him, and gave him the money anyway. Is that not corruption? Is that not corruption? I don't think that that is the reason why she doesn't want to send weapons to Ukraine. I think it's a talking point that someone has served her on a silver platter.
over there for now going on over 2 years. It's problematic for a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans don't know what.
Like when we talk about corruption in Ukraine, I don't hear people bring up the hostile military administration. I don't hear about the scandal around military uniforms, overpriced military uniforms, because that money was Ukrainian money. And so it doesn't fit into the narrative, because then that's not talking about American aid money. That's talking about Ukrainian money. It's not talking about our money being misused. That's their money being misused. And then scandals and arrests around that. And so if they cared about Ukrainian corruption, they'd be talking about these stories. Instead, they're talking about $1 billion that was untracked, that we have no evidence that was misused. Untracked because our staff was fleeing the country because mass graves were filling the roads up to the Capitol.
Where our money is going, we don't know how it's being accounted for. We don't trust our government or theirs.
We have an inspector general. We do know how it's being accounted for. The Inspector General report specifically said we don't know about that 1 billion because we didn't have the staff in the Capitol. If this is the critique would be we need to invest more into staffing to check it. We need to invest more and allow our staffers to possibly put their lives at risk to go near the front and check it closer to the front. That would be the critique, not, oh my God, I didn't see where this $1 billion went. So therefore, this national security priority no longer matters. I'm going to abandon it because of the vibe of corruption around our money, even though we have no evidence our money has been misused. God, man. These are the type of people talking foreign policy to millions of people. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that we even put these people on TV. Because like when we all die and our civilization collapses and aliens come in and they look at us and this is the type of stuff they're going to find, man, I don't think they're going to be very impressed.
Where our money is going, we don't know how it's being accounted for. We don't trust our government or theirs to tell us where it's going. So that's where the problem lies.
Okay, let me bring in.
And we also believe if we really want to squeeze Putin and we want to squeeze Russia, but Piers, I want to say this, we should be focusing also on American energy independence, because when you have strong American energy independence, that's another way
But
that
America,
you cut off
In large part because of our support to Ukraine, Europe is more dependent on American energy exports and LNG exports than ever. We've more than doubled our LNG export terminals. I mean, LNG export capacity is massively increasing. Biden, who's supposed to be environmental president, has approved tons of drilling contracts. America is the #1 energy producer in the world under the Biden admin. By the way, to the chagrin of many environmental activists.
Broadly has
because
America has broadly more energy independence than most countries in the world, so that's not a big problem. Your independence for energy is very strong compared to most European countries. Destiny, you've been listening patiently to this. I want to play a clip. This is Trump talking about
God, she's smiling again. God.
Foreign policy in his speech at the weekend.
Viktor Orban, somebody I respect.
There's another thing. If they care about corruption, why do they love Viktor Orban so much? Regularly ranked as having the most public sector corruption of any EU country. Hungary. Taking EU funds and putting them off into projects through subsidy shell companies, have no experience in construction, but they're spending all this EU money in these corrupt ways. Everyone can see it. It's an open secret. And they love him because culture war.
Greatly. A lot of people respect him. Tough guy, smart guy. He made the statement recently. He said, you bring back Trump, it'll all stop. They all listened to Trump. They respected Trump. He actually said it stronger than he said they were afraid of Trump. I don't want people to be afraid of me. But he said China was afraid, Russia was afraid. They were all afraid of Trump. Bring him back, and it'll all go back.
What do you think, Tess? I mean, there is an argument to say that Trump's erratic, unpredictable style on the global stage
madman
did
theory
make people think twice. I mean, not much of any serious gravity happened on his watch. He did not, as Tomi says, he didn't launch a new war anywhere.
Didn't American troops get killed? Weren't American bases directly bombed by Iran? I mean, there were things of gravity that did happen, but I mean, it's impossible to say. Madman theory is hotly debated.
Is there some merit to the madness, if you like?
No. People seem to want to give Trump credit for some things, like people not starting wars or people not engaging in certain types of, I guess, international armed conflict decisions. But the reality is that if you analyze any of the actual particular things that he did when it came to foreign policy, most of them were the precursors for the conflict that we are now blaming on Biden. For instance, I brought up before the round of Doha talks that happened between the Taliban and the United States. The Afghanistan government wasn't even included in those talks. If you look at what's happening right now in Israel and Palestine, the whole Abraham Accords, where Donald Trump was heralded as having peace in the Middle East. The whole reason that was done, in a way, was to avoid Israel annexing the West Bank and to undermine the Palestinians there that wanted to negotiate with Israel for peace. The whole Abraham Accords completely cut them out of the conversation. It's one of the reasons why Hamas felt so slighted. It's one of the reasons why Palestinians are engaging in more violent activity against Israel, is because nobody's ever been negotiating with them. So there's like this very...
Dude, can we look at the Trump peace plan for a second on Israel? Can we look at this quick? Trump Israel peace plan. Look at this. You think Biden's peace plan or the Saudi peace plan was unfavorable in some way? Oh my God. Look at this. Look at the chicken pox ass West Bank. Oh my God. You know what that says that connects Gaza to the West Bank? West Bank Gaza tunnel. They're going to funnel all the Palestinians underground to go to the West Bank. Dog. Look, I'm not saying a tunnel's 100% a horrible idea, is the worst idea of the world, but when you combine chicken pox with you can't even walk through our country, also you don't get a military. Like, you combine all these things together, it makes them completely unpalatable. Like one of these, like for example, demilitarized Palestinian state, that's what the Saudis want. But when you combine a demilitarized Palestinian state with this chickenpox ass stuff in the West Bank, and all you give them in return is an industrial area in the middle of the fucking desert. Like, yeah, no, it was never going to succeed, which it didn't.
Very superficial view that you can take where you can say, oh, Donald Trump was good for foreign policy because no new wars happened to start under this 4-year time period. But if you look at what he was actually setting up in any of the countries where the conflict is going on, all he was doing was setting the stage to kick the can down the road for future conflict to erupt, which it has.
All right, Destiny, what would you give Trump credit for?
What domestically or internationally?
Anything. Give him some credit for something.
Let's see, if I had to give Trump credit for anything, I mean, our economy was strong under Trump. I do think sometimes that Democrats are too heavy-handed when it comes to things related to welfare or things related to taxation. I don't like the idea of demonizing success. I think that Republicans typically do a better job, or did do a better job, at things like patriotism or championing wealth or people that were making money. So I guess I would give Trump.
See how she stopped smiling when he said did do a better job? God, her smile is a great indicator of it's like God, it's like watching like a cat's ears go like furrow down and check their mood.
I guess general credit for things like that. I mean, I save money on my taxes.
And Tommy, just to return the favor, can you think of something good to say about Joe Biden?
By the way, if you were to ask me to say a good thing about Trump, I would say he did do a tiny bit of police reform that was good. I forget what the act was called, but there was one act which some conservatives now don't hate him for, but really disagree that he did do, that gave some people some rehabilitative justice that I thought was okay. I forget what the name of the bill was. Somebody would bring it up in chat probably. But I thought that was a good thing Trump did. There's not much else than that, though.
You know, when I look at my country right now, there's not a whole lot that I could say about Joe Biden. I think he seems like a nice man.
Todd, shut the fuck up. I hate when people do that. People do every single time I see politicians answer this way. I know they're like a plastic doll. They're a plastic doll. They can't, everything is optics. Everything is winning. Everything is victory in conversation. You can't talk like a normal person. Like, come on. You're really going to say the CHIPS Act was bad? The CHIPS Act was bad? What about the legislation for the 9/11 firefighters to get their cancer treatment? Was that bad? Was that awful? Like, I can think of something for Trump, but she can't give Biden anything. She can't give Biden anything. It's against her. She's a media machine. Everything is about optics. Can't give a human answer. So, oh, he seems like a sweet guy. Okay, then my compliment for Trump would just be, I don't know, he's kind of funny.
Seems like perhaps a good husband, perhaps a good father, supporting.
Say something about his job. Come on.
Obviously, Hunter Biden. So he seems like he is, I'll use the words of the special counsel, a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. I don't think he's a bad person. I think that he's uniquely bad at this job.
Uniquely bad at this job.
And I think,
and so far her arguments are like the economy, which is either as good or better than Trump's, like whatever.
It's time for someone to come.
I mean, we have more jobs than pre-COVID rates, than pre-COVID loss rates.
And make America great again. And that's
I have to say, I think Destiny wins.
In one of the most exploding economies in the history of the United States, and the recovery from COVID, and all, there's not, in all of the foreign policy guidance we have related to Ukraine and Israel, there's not a single positive thing that we can say about Biden's presidency right now.
Well, no, here's what I would say to you. Again, it comes down to perception, Destiny, which is you're not wrong to say that the economy is in pretty good shape in America comparative to most other countries. The problem is people in America aren't giving Biden the credit because his approval ratings are in the tank because they basically see a guy who's senile. Oof. And they don't want that person to carry on being president. 2/3 of Democrats don't want him to run again. It's not even a...
I mean, if I could switch him out with someone else, I probably would. I don't know who that person would be, and that's the problem. It has a lot of Republicans, you get the same answer.
Republican issue. His own party don't want him to.
I mean, I could be like, look, I would like Elizabeth Warren to run to this place. I could predict all these people, but do I think any of these people have a shot? No, I don't think any of these people have a shot. It would have to be done at the convention at this point. It would have to be Joe Biden at the convention awarding somebody else with his delegates, because he has a gigantic delegate lead, the nomination for president.
I definitely agree there's perception issues, but I mean,
Like, if he could do that and he could hand it over to, I don't know, maybe Sherrod Brown, but we need the Senate seat. Sherrod Brown is, I think, a strong-ish candidate, but that would mean we would have to bet on the country getting to know Sherrod Brown in 100 days and liking what they see. That's why kind of skipping the primary process I was always against, even if I thought Biden was still going to curb stomp it.
I mean, hey, listen, we're in the media. The goal is to fight the perceptions because I think the perceptions are crafted here. And again, I question the authenticity of people that are calling Biden's job performance, into question because of his senility when Donald Trump got almost no major legislation passed, when Donald Trump kicked the can down the road on every single large issue. I also think that a lot of the perceptions of Americans right now in terms of voting for Biden and his favorability is having to do with the fact that apparently a lot of Americans aren't even sure who's going to be on the ballot. I think a lot of Americans still have questions about Biden running because of his age. A lot of Americans still have questions about Trump running because of the incoming indictments. I think as the months start to creep forward, I think we might see sentiment change, especially if the special election history over the past few years in America has been any indication about where American sentiments are feeling.
What he's referring to is the New York third special election. The polling results were very different from the results. We were much better for the Democrats, like 8 points above what was predicted. It was a lot less close than people expected. But a problem I would give is a lot of these races where Democrats are performing very well, there are some polls that seem to indicate that you match Democrats with Biden and the Democrats in those districts will perform better than Biden. And some of these districts, like in the New York third, the candidate that was running there, Susie, he distanced himself from Joe Biden in that race and he won. And so the question is that an indication of people getting ready, being happy and ready to vote for Democrats and Joe Biden, or just Democrats and I don't know about Joe Biden? Because I think that just because they had a good result in the New York third doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate into the presidential race. It's two different candidates. There's a big difference in time between now and then. So while I do think it's a positive indicator, I would be very careful about using it to say, well, we're gonna knock it out of the park here
in terms of supporting Democrats or Republicans.
All I would say in response to that is that if you look just at the Iowa caucus, he didn't even win that in 2016, but he won it this time by a landslide. That says to me that support for Trump is increasing. And remember, he got nearly 10 million more votes.
Well, then you could say the same thing about Biden. I mean, Biden didn't win the Iowa caucus. And he didn't even run in the Iowa caucus this time, and he won. Because they skipped it. They wanted it first to be South Carolina because they wanted a strong Biden victory in South Carolina, that state that they knew that he was strong in. So the Democrats tried to skip the Iowa caucuses, and they did, and Biden still won.
In 2020 than he got in 2016. That was after 4 years of if you listen to Democrats, after 4 years of the most hellish presidency in history, 10 million more Americans went out and voted for him. I just want to switch gears to Tomi. I know you've got to go.
Wait, that's that he wanted to respond to that. Whatever.
Quickly about Prince Harry and what Donald Trump said about him.
Who cares about Prince Harry?
Saying that this is in relation to this court case where the Biden administration has been defending Harry over an attempt to try and have his visa immigration papers made public to see whether he admitted his drug abuse that he revealed in his book, because that might disqualify him for his right to stay in the country. And it seemed to me the Biden administration, through the immigration people they put up, went out of their way to defend Harry, saying that he may not have even meant what he wrote in the book. It wasn't facts, almost basically saying, look, he probably lied, so we can't take it seriously, which is pretty damning, given it was his autobiography. But when Trump was asked about this, he said, I wouldn't protect him. He betrayed the Queen. That's unforgivable.
He betrayed the Queen. That's unforgivable. President of the United States.
He would be on his own if it was down to me. I would say that's quite ominous, because if Trump was to win the election and win back the White House, given the way Harry and Meghan have talked about Trump in a very disparaging manner, I could quite see Trump being petty enough to put Harry on the first boat out of China or out of America.
Well, I'll tell you this, there are a lot more people that need to be deported that have come to our country illegally, a lot for Donald Trump to do on day one to get our country back on track. But I will say this, Donald Trump is not somebody who coddles people. He's not somebody who is going to coddle Prince Harry and Meghan. Obviously, they've said bad things about him, and the Biden camp, the Democrats like Harry and Meghan because they feel like maybe they're some kind of liberal superstars. But, you know, I think Donald Trump is going to tell it like it is, and he doesn't care how much money you have. And
can we skip? I actually don't care about Prince Harry in any way. Can we skip this? Can we skip this completely?
Destin, you're going to stay with me because I want to talk to you.
Okay, now we're all over to Palestine, Israel, I think.
About your response to last week's debate on Uncensored between Professor Norman Finkelstein and Rabbi Shmuley. I think it's fair to say you weren't massively complimentary. Let's take a look.
Oh my God. Is there any debate? Is this actually a real debate? Or is it, who the is this loser? This is embarrassing. Rabbi Shmuley? Is he like a Twitter guy? How am I going to survive in a real one-on-one debate? This is his real talking speed. This is just stupid debate. Ugh.
By the way, can I just say, Destiny's 100% right here. Rabbi Shmuley, this dude on the right, is like a psycho. Every debate he does, it's like, you're an anti-Semite? You hate all the Jews? You want all the Jews to do? It's just bizarre. And it's in response to like always like the most mildest of critique. He's such a weird guy. He's always unhinged. He's not convincing whatsoever. He just comes off terribly every time I've seen him. Every single time I've seen him.
Thank you. I
can't believe he's giving pushback to Norm on this debate, and he let this guy yap on the most retarded ad homs for like 20 minutes. Oh my God, but he's not going to answer it. It's just like, it's a...
Damn, they're playing the R slur on national TV, huh?
Stupid argument on so many different levels.
I don't equivocate either with the other.
Sound the incorrect use of equivocate alarm. Bro, oh my God. These are the types of posts I ban from my subreddit. We get it. Oh my God.
Just on a technical point, I think I was using the word equivocate correctly there, unless I'm wrong.
I'd have to go back and analyze the use of the word equivocate. Let me be clear: the stuff we do on stream is obviously way more relaxed than this environment. But the main criticism, the main criticism that I basically have with almost all of the Israel-Palestine debates is both sides have this hyper-specific narrative that tends to omit every single exculpatory thing from the other side, and it drives me crazy. So whether it's a rabbi on here that's talking about like the innocence of Israel, or even the guy you had on right before saying like, well, Israel doesn't like to fight, we don't like to do that. It's like, really? Because Israel has taken advantage of every single military opportunity they've had in the history to expand their territory. So saying they don't want to fight is really silly. But then on the other hand, you get pro-Palestinian people who would say things like, well, Hamas can be a partner for peace, and October 7th was just in response to the horrible concentration camp-like conditions of a region of the world that really isn't even doing that bad compared to other places in the region. So I just hate how hyperbolized both sides of the argument are.
I actually don't disagree with you, and I thought Rabbi Shmuley...
Wait, like compared to what in the region? Compared to Lebanon? Then I mean, like maybe, yeah, but they're both in economic crisis, you know? Compared to like Dubai, yeah, you're in a totally different situation.
Please.
And like doing well in what way? Like, do they have sovereignty over their own lives? Do they? It depends on like, well, in what manner? Like, are we just talking about like GDP, or are we talking about like in how they can govern themselves, how they can control themselves, what rights they have, etc.
Ad hominem attacks on the professor were completely over the top, but actually quite illuminating about him and his style of debating. I don't think he played well with the audience at all. And I had a lot of Israelis tweeting me saying, why do you keep having this guy on? He talks in such an inflammatory manner that it doesn't make us look good. So I think that he let himself down a bit there. And on the wider point, I kind of agree. I've had so many of these debates about Israel. It's very hard to do anything that doesn't immediately get dragged to the extremities in terms of the debate. Very hard to reach any point of consensus. You know, and I find that that's the dispiriting thing about that debate, and it may explain why the whole conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine has been going on 75 years and appears so completely intractable. Nobody gives an inch.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's on the ground in Israel-Palestine, you have that issue where both sides have basically their myths that Israel fashioned themselves as these poor people, these poor Jews that wandered into the Middle East and had to fight these impossibly huge Arab armies that had domineering and overwhelming force and power and coordination, when in reality, post 48, Israel was always in a decent position to fight, and that was pretty obvious in their performance in 48, in 67, in 73. It was pretty obvious that they had the military capability to survive. But then on the other hand, you get, the Palestinian narrative of they were a poor, dispossessed people in their lands who only ever wanted peace. I think I saw a tweet saying we welcomed Israelis with open arms. That's absolutely not true. I think
not only is that not true, but even the people who were not Israelis were just Jews in the region. Many of them, especially like in places like Yemen, were expelled, and then they went to Israel, and that actually only empowered Israel more.
That the on-the-ground narratives contribute to the conflict feeling intractable. But unfortunately, I think internationally, I think we feed into the intractability as well, because people are that conflict is so perfect for everybody to have a really strong opinion. You've got brown people and white people, you've got Jews and Muslims, you've got oppressed and oppressors, you've got Western colonial and Middle Eastern countries. Like, everybody can have an opinion about this conflict because of the different parties involved. And people are so not level-headed when it comes to evaluating what's going on that they end up hyping up both sides, and they elevate the expectations to unrealistic levels, which means neither side is really willing to actually settle for a realistic resolution that might make both sides feel a little bit good and a little bit unhappy.
What do you think a realistic resolution looks like?
Oh God.
I think it's a multifaceted thing, but I would say that it has to be some kind of two-state solution, and both sides need to be willing to negotiate for peace. And this is the hard one, both sides probably need to be willing to sacrifice a little bit for peace. That means that not every Palestinian is going to be happy with the final resolution. It means that Abbas might have to suffer, even more loss of his popularity.
By the way, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Abbas's staff, his prime minister and a bunch of other people, resigned in protest against him. He's very unpopular right now. I mean, he's always been pretty unpopular, but now he's more unpopular than ever.
Or whatever Palestinian.
So the idea of Abbas leading a unified Palestinian state is pretty hard to believe at this point. I don't think it's possible.
Leader rises might have to suffer more loss of popularity. It might mean on the Israeli side, similar to Begin or Rabin, negotiators for peace in the past, you might have to pay a political price for being a negotiator for peace, because sometimes the Israeli people or your Knesset doesn't always support you when you're negotiating peace.
The former Egyptian dictator was assassinated in part because he negotiated peace with the Israelis.
Against either Arab states or Palestinians. But the leadership has to be there, that has to be willing to suffer a setback or some loss initially.
By the way, that's the type of thing that Mike Johnson should take on the chin, but of course he won't, because he's choosing himself over the country.
For the peace agreement. And then both people need to have some kind of tolerance to say, hey, listen, we might not get everything we want on the old city. That applies to Jews and Muslims, or that applies to Israelis and Palestinians. Or, hey, we might have to do a lot of land swaps in the West Bank. Hey, all of these settlements that are outside of directly near the Green Line, maybe these do need to be torn down. But yeah, the conversation, we're not even a place where we can start the conversation on that yet, because people don't even know if Hamas should exist or not, or if Israel has a right to defend itself, or if maybe murdering 1,200 civilians is a reasonable response to the supposed concentration camp conditions that exist in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, you did a debate with Cenk Uygur, who's been on this show many times. In it, you said about deaths in Gaza that the ratio of Hamas to civilians killed were good ratios. But I'm not sure about that. And I'll tell you why. The problem I have with the whole death rate in Gaza, especially when there's a comparison made to World War II and how many German civilians were killed and so on, is that there is a unique population in Gaza of 50%.
I would also think that we have generally improved how we engage in warfare since World War II, or you would think we have improved since then. Because I would hope that since the rape of Berlin, we've advanced our military strategy.
Children. Now, 50% of the 2 million are under 18. That's 1 million kids running around in Gaza. And already we've seen 30,000 civilians killed, with 70,000 more wounded, many of whom are children. And that is something I've not seen in any recent conflict. And that's what makes it uniquely horrific to people.
I agree that it makes it uniquely horrific to people. I think it's really important to have a good understanding of why international humanitarian law, or more specifically, international law of armed conflict exists. I think that people have a really poor understanding that the law of armed conflict exists to make it so that the fight is even on both sides. But that's not true. It exists for two very important reasons. One is to protect civilians, and the second is to ensure that nations have a right to defend themselves. If either one of these fail, nobody would care about the law of armed conflict. I think the difficulty that Israel has right now in conducting their war against Hamas is that their cause for war, wanting to do something about Hamas, I think is undeniably righteous. That if you've got an organization that comes in, they kill, some 1,100, 1,200 citizens, and then they, capture hostage 200 more. Not only has Hamas not had a good cause for war, not only have they committed multiple war crimes in the actual commission of the October 7th attack, it gives Israel a justification to attack. Now, Israel's conduct in war is a second question. It's a very difficult question to answer. When people try to evaluate if the conduct is good or bad, they oftentimes just look at the number of civilian deaths. But when you're actually evaluating from a legal perspective on whether or not attacks are good or not, the obligation for the belligerent, for the attacking party, is just to try to do what they can to reduce civilian casualties. Now, civilian casualties are tragic. They absolutely are. But Hamas also has a responsibility.
This is my problem, though. And this is the same reason why you can't really get me to go rah, rah, rah for military aid for Israel. Is that I don't really think the Israelis are that interested in building the two-state solution that Destiny is laying out here. Now, maybe that'll change once an election comes up and there's a different administration in power, but we don't know that. We don't know what that other administration would be, and we don't know how long it's going to be until that other administration's in there. Because the Israelis, I mean, technically, if we're going how it, technically how long it has to be, or like how long until they have to do another election, there's like another 2 years before they have to do an election, like another 2-3 years or something. Now, of course, coalitions have fallen apart quite frequently in Israel, and they've had a lot of frequent elections, and that might happen. But I do want to say that the coalition that holds together this Israeli government is pretty far right. It's pretty fringe. Many of them know that if this government coalition falls apart during this period of reforming history, possibly reforming borders, they want themselves at the decision-making table. They want themselves in the government. And if their coalition falls apart, they're not going to be part of another coalition. Ben Gvir is not going to be accepted by the Benny Gantz coalition, I do not think. Even if I don't like Benny Gantz either. I just don't think it will. So it's just a question of when will a new government come by, which might or may not change the position on a two-state solution. But also, for a lot of states like Saudi Arabia, a two-state solution is kind of like the fundamental building block upon which peace can be made. So if you want to start making peace anytime soon, how do you do it with a country that doesn't want to start with those building blocks? Do we just wait 3, 4, 5 years of Israeli occupation of Gaza for the hope that down the line that they'll create an independent Palestinian state? I don't know. I don't have the answer to this question. This is why I think we need to pressure the Bibi government. But it's also not politically opportune to do so because Israel still has a lot of support, even if the Democrat base is becoming more pro-Palestine and people want the war to end.
As the sole administrator in the region to shield.
When you poll people, do you want the war to end, even if it means no hostage exchange or Hamas continues to govern the Gaza Strip? The polling data is 66%. Israel can continue or should continue to fight until they eliminate. The American public is still solidly pro-Israel, even if we're seeing a massive transformation in the American public right now, still relative to our history in supporting of Israel.
Shield their population, not use them as human shields, to make sure their population is allowed to flee, not tell them to stay in their homes when Israel roof knocks, when they make phone calls, when they drop leaflets, when they give advance notice, when they give whole region-wide text messages. Right? Israel's doing what they can, more than any other country has in any type of armed conflict, to try to warn the civilian population to flee. But for a variety of reasons, they're not doing it. Some due to Hamas. Some
I don't think than any other army ever. I don't know about that.
Maybe due to their.
But also, if they need to flee, they have to have a place to flee to, right? Where can they flee to?
Their fears of getting attacked anyway, because obviously there have been tons of places that have come under attack, even places in the south. But I just think it's important to note that when we're criticizing Israel, it can't be on the absolute number of deaths. It has to be on things like when the 3 hostages came out and they were shot by the IDF. Those are things where you're like, well, hold on. These guys were wearing white flags. Why are you shooting at these people? That's not good. It can't just be on the absolute number of casualties, because if that's the fixation, then.
Or the bombing of the Greek Orthodox Church, or all those lynchings in the West Bank.
And in the future, no nation is going to consider any laws of armed conflict when going to war, because they're going to say, oh, well, they don't care what the ratios are. They don't care our targeting decisions. They're just upset that civilians are dying, which unfortunately and tragically always happens in the course of war.
If you were the parent of one of the 12,000 or so children who've been killed by Israeli airstrikes, would you willingly and quickly buy into a brave new world of living peacefully side by side with Israel, or would you be implacably determined to exact revenge for the slaughter of your child?
I feel like on a personal level, especially somebody that has a child, I feel like I would want to fight till the end of time.
Right, but that's my point. So that is the natural human reaction, which surely tens of thousands of Palestinian fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, grandparents, they're going to have to this slaughter of the children. And so I don't understand why Israel thinks it's not just building for itself a potentially even bigger problem down the line in terms of the...
Especially since this administration also doesn't want a two-state solution, does not want to create a Palestinian state.
Radicalization through deaths of children of the people who love those kids.
I understand what you're saying, but after World War II, I mean, we all got along after that in a surprisingly short amount of time, given how horrific some of the Japanese...
Yeah, but there was never... was there an argument, like... I know there were some people, I think maybe like, should Germany even exist? But we all knew that, like, Germany eventually would exist in some form. There was a West Germany, and then there was an East Germany. And then eventually it brought back together, and we all acknowledged that. The solution to World War II wasn't to make Japan not exist or to make it so, oh, we're going to make Japan like half America or like mostly America, or we're going to make it so, like, it was eventually the creation of German and Japanese states. So even if you wanted to take the position that the Hamas has to be destroyed in order for peace to be possible, they have to be destroyed, all their control of territory has to be annihilated, you still have to come to the conclusion that Palestinians need some representation. They need to be given some version of a state.
crimes were in China, given how horrific Germany's crimes were around all of Europe, or relating to concentration camps or death camps. Like, it is possible to mend those bridges. I do agree right now that Israel might be contributing towards more hatred of Jewish people, of Israeli citizens in the Gaza Strip. That's undeniable. But then the question becomes, well, who's responsible for managing Israeli public relations in the Gaza Strip? If you ask an Israeli citizen, like, hey, aren't you worried that you're going to radicalize people in the Gaza Strip? What Israeli citizens are thinking of is they're either thinking of watching the video of that girl go back on the back of the truck where everybody's like clapping and cheering, and they're thinking, well, they hate us anyway. Or they're thinking of the Second Intifada, where there are 4 or 5 years worth of attacks from 2000 to 2004 or 5 in Israel, and think, well, they already hate us anyway in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They're thinking of the Martyr Fund. They're thinking there are so many different aspects of this conflict that I agree Israel is giving Palestinians good cause to hate them. The Palestinians have given Israelis good cause to hate and not trust them either. And this is one of the problems that we talked about at the very beginning. The mythos runs so deep on both sides that they're both infinitely justified morally if they want to hate each other forever. But obviously, that's not a conductive road forward towards anything peaceful.
Destiny, I know you've got a big debate coming up yourself with Professor Norman Finkelstein, hosted by Lex Friedman. That is going to be huge. You feeling ready for that?
The 3 people involved are all giants in this field. I am definitely a newcomer. I'm definitely like a YouTuber, streamer person. I hope that rhetorically I'm able to hang on to the conversation. Obviously, I've done a decent amount of research and reading, but obviously the 3 of these figures involved, have a much greater background than me in this issue. So I'm not going in with any illusion that I'm the subject matter expert here. My debate partner for this is Benny Morris, and this guy knows more about anything related to 48 history and everything with Israel. So I'm probably going to be leaning on his historical knowledge quite a bit.
Rest assured,
I wonder how he's going to go. Is he going to get aggressive with normal Finkelstein? I mean, I know normal Finkelstein doesn't like him, and I know that Destiny doesn't like normal Finkelstein that much, but from the little bit of clips I've been seeing, it seems that Destiny is taking this seriously. He is doing research, but I don't know how he's going to approach the debate. Is he going to be aggressive? I think he's probably going to match the tempo. I think that's what Destiny's going to do. He's going to go in there and match the tempo. If Finkelstein starts throwing insults, he'll start throwing insults. That's what I think. We'll see.